I'm your first speaker today, Bob Wright, and I want to welcome you and offer you a good afternoon and a thank you for all of you joining us today for one of our global speaker series lunches. This season's series is focused on issues that impact us all locally and around the globe. Today's speaker brings insight into the world of national security and intelligence. As Executive Director, Buzzy Krongard served as the third in charge of the CIA on September 11, 2001. His story reflects the experience after, including his days in Afghanistan. We are truly getting an insider's look today. Be sure you also watch his interview with our own Tim Malloy on Palm Beach TV, our Civic Association newscast. Your membership's dues and donations allow us not only to bring you programs like this, but also to produce weekly news. The Civic Association is Palm Beach's only producer of live news, delivered to your inbox each week. Please be sure you are receiving This Week in Palm Beach. You do not want to miss what's happening in our community and all the great human interest stories our team is producing. If you don't know how to do that or you're not clear, please ask one of the people here and they can make sure you understand how to set that up, because it's really marvelous stuff. Next month in our Global Speaker Series, you'll hear from leaders in ocean research and in finance. Mark your calendars for Oscar Schofield on March 2nd and Ken Griffin on March 17th. The response from our members has been very, very strong. Your support allows the Civic Association to present all these programs in our efforts to engage and educate residents and bring our community together for common good. Thank you for your commitment. Please enjoy your lunch.
I am going to ask Dan Ponton to stand, please, because we wish to thank you. Dan is the Civic Association Director. He's also the proprietor of Club Colette and Surfside Diner. And Dan, my table has requested, could you provide valet parking to Surfside, please? Exactly. But in all seriousness, Dan, we thank you so much. We truly enjoy coming here. Every time we're here, it's a very special place for the Civic Association, and we also thank you for all you do for our community. All right, and moving along to introducing our incredible keynote speaker. A U.S. Marine Corps captain with the initials AB, known as Buzzy Krongard, retired from the Central Intelligence Agency on November 30th, 2004. Prior to his appointment, Mr. Krongard served as counselor to the Director of Central Intelligence, among various other connections with the agency. Mr. Krongard has received numerous financial industry awards and the CIA's Distinguished Intelligence Medal, the Director's Medal, and the Directors of Operation Donovan Award and Warren Medallion. Mr. Krongard received a bachelor's degree with honors from Princeton University and a Juris Doctor degree with honors, again, from the University of Maryland School of Law. And while at Princeton, Mr. Krongard played lacrosse, and in 1980, he was inducted as a member of the National Lacrosse Hall of Fame. And I think we have a photograph. This can be seen, actually, in the Hall of Fame of Mr. Krongard. And Buzzy's additional hobbies are scuba diving, as well as the game of golf, and he holds black belts, or equivalent in several martial arts disciplines. So as I've mentioned to a few people, let's be on his good side today. A native of Baltimore, Buzzy and his wife, Cheryl, and where is Cheryl? Okay, all right. So Buzzy and Cheryl live in Palm Beach. We are delighted that they are new members of the Civic Association and our wonderful community. And ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Buzzy Krongard, as he shares with us an insider's look at intelligence.
Thank you very much for that introduction. If I were introducing me, I would make it a lot shorter. I'd say the guy's done two things in his life. He's been an investment banker and a spy. They're the only two professions where lying, cheating, and stealing are considered assets. I used to speak to all the incoming classes. And I always said, if you remember nothing else from what I'm going to tell you, remember this. If you are a woman, your makeup mirror. If you are a man, your shaving mirror. Every morning you look in this. On it, you put a piece of adhesive tape, and on it you write, "We do intelligence, we do not do policy." Because I am utterly convinced that any time you get embroiled in policy, it will skew, consciously or unconsciously, your handling of intelligence to conform to the policy side you're on. Now, what intelligence and the agency should do is to inform policy and the consequences of choice, including choosing not to choose. And lastly, and perhaps most important in these times, intelligence cannot remove all risk. In and of itself, intelligence cannot guarantee our safety. It can help reduce risk, understand risk, manage risk. It can warn of threats, and it can help carry the battle to those that put us at risk. But intelligence alone cannot prevent a repeat of 9/11. When intelligence is working well, it's doing two things. First, it informs and elevates the policy debate, ensuring that all parties are working from the same information. It helps to bound the uncertainties that surround every policy choice. And second, at the end of the day, it makes our guy smarter than their guy, whether that's across a mahogany conference table or a battlefield somewhere in Central Asia. Intelligence is rarely, if ever, a seamless fabric of fact. Only in the movies does someone steal, quote, the plans. There are no plans. Governments don't work that way. Intelligence is the compilation of hundreds of bits of information, the dots, if you will. It is a fundamental truth of intelligence that the bits of information, whatever's available there, will always be incomplete, often contradictory, and frequently suspect. Suspect in that the information may be false and intentionally leaked in an attempt to mislead, or suspect because the source of information is uncertain or untrustworthy. All information, moreover, including information that seems obvious, like an intercepted conversation or a satellite photograph, requires considerable interpretation. Did the person on the telephone have direct knowledge of whatever it is he's speaking about, or is he just gossiping? Does the new building with the extra security, the chemical plant, mean or bio weapons are being produced there, or simply that inflammable materials are being warehoused? You're almost never completely wrong or completely right in the intelligence business. There are very few instances where the intelligence collected rises to the level of evidence required in a court of law, although that seems to be the standard that some would hold us to, especially after the fact. Intelligence officers can make an intelligence case that such and such a pharmaceutical plant may be producing chemical or biological weapons, but that case would never be compelling to a jury. Why? Because the dots are fuzzy and far apart. They're held together by assumptions and deductive reasoning. It's like putting a puzzle together, only you do not have the box top with the picture on it. Moreover, many of the pieces of the puzzle are missing, wrong, pieces have been introduced, and there are very few straight edges. And usually there's a clock running somewhere because there's always a deadline by which a decision must be made or action taken. Lives are on the line. Intelligence is the art of providing the best answer possible given the time and information available. And that answer is always subject to change because international relationships are not static, and more time generally brings more, and one hopes, better information. This is my favorite part. Let me take a minute or two and walk you through the process by which we recruit someone to spy on behalf of the United States, because it is an important lens through which to make sense of some of the intelligence challenges. Now, with my magic wand, I'm making you all spies, and you're reporting to me. Let's say I ask you to recruit an agent. Now, let me stop here. In the books and the movies, I'm an agent. In real life, the agent is the Russian we're trying to recruit, or the Iraqi, or whomever. I'm a case officer. So let's say I ask you to recruit an agent who can provide information on a country's nuclear weapons program. Where do you start? You start by identifying the people who are working on the program or know something about it. How many people are there that can provide truly critical information? Not many. Let's say there are 24 people who have access to the information I've asked you to steal. It will take weeks, even months, to identify these people and come up with rudimentary knowledge about them. It's a secret program, after all. So once you've done this, you then must identify who in the group might be willing to share that information with the United States, that is, to commit espionage on our behalf. This will be a remarkable individual. He or she must be smart, resourceful, able to stand the pressure they will be under, and have the courage to follow through, knowing that a horrible death awaits them and their family if discovered or even suspected. Due process is not the rule in the places this effort occurs. Let's say 3 of the 24 candidates are deemed possibilities. You, my spies, must now get close to each one, begin the process of assessing and cultivating. But how do you get close to them? They don't travel out of their country, at least not often. They live in a police state generally. You cannot travel there, at least not easily, and certainly not as an American. And if you did, how are you going to arrange to bump into your candidates? So you do the next best thing. You find, assess, and then recruit someone else we would call an access agent, a non-American who can travel there, and a reason to make acquaintance with your targets. This also takes weeks, if not months. Let's say your access agent is able to meet, assess, and cultivate your target, again over a period of weeks and months. Now you have the challenge of introducing a CIA officer to the target to make the pitch. And that means either you go in or you wait until the target travels. This too takes time, but I'm being easy on you all. Let's assume you're successful and you are able to establish a relationship. And you conclude that, yes, the target has the access to the information we want and has the inclination and the aptitude for espionage. It's also possible you discover the target doesn't have the information you want or is unlikely to commit espionage successfully, in which case you go back and start at square one. For the sake of argument, let's say you're both good and lucky in this instance. You still have to convince the target to cooperate with the United States at the risk of his life and the family. We do not coerce or blackmail. People decide, and you'll find, I think, what I'm going to tell you interesting. People decide to cooperate for a range of reasons. We hope because they are sympathetic to the goals of the United States. However, they are most often influenced by, and you're immediately going to jump ahead of me and say, money, romance. But I'll tell you what almost all walk-ins are motivated by. Pique, P-I-Q-U-E. She got promoted over me. I'll show them I'm smarter than them. I'll get even. Very, very important. So you make your pitch. It's now months, maybe years after you began. The agent still has to be trained in espionage, told what to collect, communicated with, debriefed, paid, and if necessary, rescued. This too takes time. And at the end of the day, the agent's information may not be all that valuable. Maybe it duplicates what we already know or is questionable in some way. But again, you're good and you're lucky. The agent has the aptitude and the access that we hope for. He then begins to provide the famous dots that still must be interpreted and collated with other information. Well, congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. You've done great. You penetrated the nuclear program. Now repeat all the above for the biological weapons program, the chemical weapons program, the inner circle of leadership, etc., etc. My point is simply this. Espionage is a long, hard, expensive process. There are many, many ways things go wrong, and one recruitment rarely, if ever, gives you everything you need. You can't just turn it on and turn it off, especially as what happened to us in the 90s, a decade of disinvestment with the end of the Cold War. It takes years to rebuild agent networks that have been lost, compromised, or allowed to go silent. Let me talk a minute about the war on terrorism. The terrorist target is in many ways the toughest target the CIA has ever faced. I'm speaking now as a professional intelligence person. It hurts me to say this, but, it fortifies my soul to know that though I perish, truth is so. They're good, the terrorists. They're smart, they're disciplined, and they practice phenomenal security. The cells are small, the members are often related. They distrust people they do not know. They study our vulnerabilities, our techniques, and their mistakes that they learn from. But we have had remarkable success against them since 9/11. Perhaps the best example, it was CIA intelligence that enabled the SEAL raid, which killed bin Laden. I might add boastfully, as the father of a recently retired SEAL admiral, I'm doubly proud. That was one that we lived for. Successes notwithstanding, we're nowhere near ending the threat of terrorism in the U.S., and the death of bin Laden even does not significantly diminish the threat, in my judgment. Extremism is growing, and Al-Qaeda and now ISIS destructive expertise has received wide dissemination, guaranteeing that this threat is going to be around us for a long time. For those in the intelligence profession, there's a hard reality. CIA successes will always be out of the public view. Terrorist successes will always be very public. Our guys have to be perfect every day. They have to be lucky once. Our guys live every minute with the prospect of catastrophic failure. Success is measured for us by what does not happen. And we know there will never be a headline in the New York Times that says, "Great job, CIA, no terrorist attack today." They did, however, publish leaked information saying that we were intercepting bin Laden's communications, causing them to come to a screech halt and set us back. How do we improve our intelligence capability? Speed and agility are the keys to the war on terrorism. And as in architecture with form following function, you've got to get away with all this layering. There are now 16, I think is the number, intelligence agencies serving national security interests, and trying to get them all together and get together. There's no clear structure, no clear chain of command. Putting everything under one roof won't break the stovepipes, but short, clean lines of command and control are essential if you want to get anything done. There are two other core issues, and I haven't heard anyone speak to either issue. They're very difficult because they go to American values and involve difficult trade-offs. There was a conscious decision to cut resources at the end of the Cold War, and with that came a reduction in capability. So how much is enough? The more that is spent on defense and intelligence, the less there is available for others' needs, healthcare, education, infrastructure. But war is a come-as-you-are party. If you do not have the intelligence sources in place before you need them, they won't be there when you do need them. Steady, sustained investment is required. The other trade-off involves privacy. The more information available to the intelligence community, and the Patriot Act has been vital in this regard, the greater our ability to connect the dots. It's also true, the greater our ability to connect the dots, the greater potential for abuse. Where do you strike the balance? Only you and your elected representatives can determine what the proper balance should be on these two issues. It's not a decision for intelligence officers. We ask only one thing: a clear definition of the mission. What is it you precisely expect? And the resources consistent with what we're asked to do. Second, an agreed upon set of rules on how we're to do that mission, and then be held to that standard. Do not reinterpret the rules later, as is the fashion of the day. We'll get it done, but to quote an old saying, if you want it bad, you get it bad. In the Cold War, we could talk to our adversaries. There was a general consensus on what was and was not acceptable behavior. Both sides had an interest in preserving the status quo, and the competition was largely on the margins. And most important, it was possible to work issues and through hard negotiations come to mutually acceptable solutions. Now we have an adversary that does not have territory to defend, has little or no interest in the status quo, and believe they have a religious obligation to kill all Americans and a moral obligation to acquire and use weapons of mass destruction. The war on terrorism is the new reality, and we're going to be living with it for a while. And the United States homeland will be the brass ring, and they will attempt to acquire and use WMD here. For the first time since Appomattox, a war is being fought on U.S. soil. Terrorist organizations learn from their mistakes, and they are quick to exploit any vulnerabilities they identify. Notwithstanding the foregoing, the terrorists have more to fear from us than we do today. And we sit here today, our officers are very much on the offensive, the clandestine meetings, often in hostile environments, not for money, not for fame, but to collect some information that will shed light on the intentions, capabilities of those who would do us harm. Our children face an uncertain future, but they will prevail. America always has and always will. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's open it up for questions, please. Ron Twilliger.
Can you comment about the WMD mistake in Iraq? How that intelligence happened?
Yeah, near and dear to my heart.
Could you repeat the question?
The question is, comment on the WMD mistake in Iraq. He had used WMD on his own people. We were reporting that he was behind in his nuclear program. The biggest thing, and by the way, virtually at the time, the Brits came back and said later that the guy we were using wasn't good, but that was after the fact. The big thing was he kept saying he had WMD over and over again. He was talking to the Iranians. But because we're saying, how can he say that? All he's doing is hyping up what we should come in and do. But he wasn't interested in that. He was trying to get the Iranians to believe it, and we blew it. I mean, I told you, it ain't easy. But we blew it, and we learned a lot from it.
I'm going to defer to Mr. Houghton on my
This is like Congress. You're passing your time along.
Apologize for the question because you made the point earlier that intelligence informs policy. Actually, I think you really meant that intelligence should inform policy.
Good point.
In fact, it does seem to me that this extraordinarily capable intelligence capability that we have, and very expensive, is unable to get through that to an administration that does not seem to wish to be informed by intelligence at all. Not in all cases, but in enough cases so that one has to ask oneself whether in fact there's a serious national security issue when the intelligence agencies cannot get their views into the White House.
President Trump handles intelligence in a way very radically different than any other president in my experience, and that goes back, number of presidents. It also, I can only speak for myself. When I was operational, I did things that people were say, you got to be out of your mind. It's my life. I can do what I want with it. Never had any stress or strain serving the country. That if I were in a position where you all are spies again and you're working for me, I would have stress for the following reason. I'm asking you to risk your life to get intelligence that he pays no attention to. So to me, that would be stress. Now, maybe he is right in all the ways he does, but he doesn't read it and he doesn't listen to it, and his instincts, if you look, for example, whether Russia interfered in our elections, every single of the 16 intelligence, everybody said independently and then together, right? The murder of Khashoggi, and MBS, the Saudi prince. President Trump said maybe he knew or ordered it, or maybe he didn't. Well, that's absolutely true. In logic, that's called P or not P. There's no other possibility. He either did or he didn't, okay? It happens to be vacuous, but it's absolutely true. So I wish him all the luck in the world, but he does handle intelligence in a different way.
What do you think about things like waterboarding and torture to get intelligence?
I'm glad you asked that because I'd like to share that. I'm not ashamed or proud of this, but to the extent that any individual had with the enhanced interrogation, first of all, it's not torture. Torture, the only purpose of torture is to inflict pain and often ending in death. You go back to the Spanish Inquisition and the band around the head, things like that. With dead people, you can't get intelligence from. I was telling you about our resources being cut. When 9/11 occurred, we had, by our shrinking budget, we had really no interrogation effort. Guys, that's all they studied and did. At Fort Bragg, the military, the special operations, they had a psychological psyops operation. That's the closest we had. I was the extra then. I sent out a note to chiefs of stations in all friendly or neutral countries asking, what experience have you had with techniques for interrogation, particularly cultural? This works well on Asian women. This works well on Arab men, Came back, we had 28 techniques. The general counsel and the deputy general counsel said, go down to the Justice Department, give them the list. Do not editorialize, do not request. Tell us what we can do. They came back with 12, later shrunk to 10, in writing, 4 different times, approving them all. So if you have a problem, see the Justice Department. Okay, they told us what we could do. We knew it was going to be an issue, number one. Number two, had I gone out, say, a month after 9/11, and you all represent a proxy for the entire country, and told you what we're going to do, sleep deprivation, extended arm, face squeeze, wall push, waterboarding, you'd have been screaming. That's all you're going to do? You know, you're not going to burn them, you're not going to skin them or to get information. I mean, you've been screaming at me. So it all comes back. Now, let me make one third point that drives me crazy. Waterboarding is absolutely first of all, you know, anybody that's a diver here and you dive long enough, you basically get a simulated drowning thing. And we've all gone through waterboarding. The difference is you know you're not going to die from it, whereas when you're doing it to terrorists or something, they don't know it simulates drowning, okay? Waterboarding might be a piece of cake for me, whereas dangling a worm might drive me crazy. It's a different thing for different people. So the first thing is that waterboarding is absolutely horrible. We waterboarded 3 people, none of whom died, and from whom we got good intel. And that's horrible. In the Obama administration, drone strikes, the guy always dies, there's always collateral damage, and you get no intel. He's dead. And drone strikes, nobody, the people screaming about waterboarding, they never had a problem with drone strikes. So I can't figure that out.
Well, I was going to ask you sort of a follow-up on the previous gentleman's question.
I'm not there. I still, you know, have friends that are there. It's tough. I mean, you're breaking your neck and risking your neck for what? And the threat, look, I've been in places with people where your chances are all of you aren't coming out of where you are. And we've talked about everything. I could not tell you who's a Republican, who's a Democrat, who's conservative, liberal. It's just not, it doesn't apply or occur. And I can't speak for anything but the intel community or the CIA. So there's no deep state that I'm aware of. Although, don't forget, everybody there is an accomplished liar, you know. But I never saw any evidence of it at all.
It seems the SEALs and the equivalent in other forces, the Army, have become a very integral part of our foreign policy. How do you interact? How do you coordinate the decision-making with those?
We could not possibly get along any better with the special operations people, particular SEAL Team 6, Delta, but all of them. And, you know, Howard Cox is sitting at that table down there trying to escape. But Howard, something we formed when I was at the agency called Incutel, which is called a venture capital for intelligence. And we over 300 technologies have been taken over. If we want to send Lynn as an undercover agent to Yemen, right, she's got to communicate. She's walking down the street with an iPad under her arm. She's going to last maybe 2 minutes. A shepherd's crook, capable of sending an encrypted burst to an overhead satellite. That's the kind of thing that Incutel gets done. And the special operations community is bought in big to that. And there's so many personal relationships. Couldn't get along any better.
Any other questions? Yes.
To follow up on that, you know, the current condition of the internet sophistication of the CIA, particularly with ransomware and also the transfer of funds through cyber techniques. I just read today that North Korea is bypassing
is the CIA up to speed in the cyber world? I'm going to give you, this is not meant to be a smart alecky answer. There's an old rodeo saying, there ain't a horse that can't be rode, there ain't a man that can't be throwed. You know, some years ago when all this was, I remember some company was offering $1 million to anyone that could break their system. 6 months later, they announced they had written a check for $1 million. Each technological advance shortens the interval till the next technological advance. So an ironclad system, quote, with quotes around it, you know it's just a matter of how long it's going to be ironclad. And remember when I told you that the New York Times leaked on the bin Laden thing? What happened then? Bin Laden went to couriers. He whispered in her ear, she whispered in his ear. That's the safest way. Marcus Wolf, who ran the Stasi, the East German intelligence service, never, everything was in writing, kept in a safe, or a courier. You read it, you memorize it, you repeat it back to me, and then burn it. I mean, anything you put up there sooner or later is going to get had.
Bill Meyer.
Can you comment as to whether there were direct impacts from the
Valley Plain.
Yeah.
The only thing I'll say about that, Valerie called, you know, she got a picture, you know, and blah, blah, blah. And she called me to say, hey, Buzzy, I drove up to my house and they were waiting for me. And she drove up in a convertible. And it took me by surprise. I said, Valerie, I'm an intelligence guy, right? I know you were in the beauty parlor for 2 hours before you drove up in the convertible, okay? And she and her husband, who was making speeches, some of these people, I'm the most anti-book person there is for people in the intelligence business, and I'll quickly tell you why. But these people write books, they want to publish it. Nancy Brinker writes a book, and in the book she says, the highlight of my career was meeting, remember what an agent is, it's not the CIA, meeting our #1 Russian agent in Paris in the spring of so-and, okay? Lynn writes her book. And looking back, I'll never forget meeting our #1 agent in the fall of such and such and such and such. And Bob Wright, he writes his book. Russian counterintelligence are not stupid. They read every one of these, they triangulate. How many people had access to this kind of information that in 3 years on either side of the dates, they get it down to 30, 40 people? They do what we call a deep dive. You know, you bug the house, they go through the bank records, blah, blah. We lose our agent. I mean, so pre-publication review, they just got to, you know, just say, you want to write books, don't come to the CIA.
Because you talked about the expense of spying. It's my sense that there's some competition between the Pentagon, the CIA, and various branches of the military that have their own source of military.
Well, in theory, yeah, but Anson, in theory, the military is only supposed to deal in military intelligence. And we do, you know, that comes into us, but they're much more interested in tactical insurance than intelligence and strategic insurance. They're supposed to be, but you know, there was a time when I was there when Wolfowitz was the deputy, and they were getting all their intel, you know, their blah blah blah, and the savior of Iraq was their guy. I call him the Gucci Iraqi, and because they had great intelligence, you know, on him and everything. Yeah, and he's a phony. I mean, because the agency, when I was there, we basically had a much stronger relationship with Jordan, and King Abdullah And then, of course, he was just a prince, but he ran their special operations military, and so I would have to entertain him every time he came to America. And and the big thing was he's a hero in Iraq and everything. And I once asked Abdullah, I said, "Can I ask you a favor?" He said, "Buzzy, you can ask me anything you want, you know, what you've done for me." I said, "What would happen if he showed up in Iraq?" He said he'd be arrested the moment he stepped on the ground. And yet, Rumsfeld was indifferent. It was Wolfowitz and Richard Pearl, the Prince of Darkness, and all those neocons and everything. And I don't know what they had going with this guy. I know we're running out of time. Here, we kept bad-mouthing him, and they said, "You haven't even ever met him." So George Tenet asked me to do a clean scoop, start at the beginning. I did, and the people that have worked on it, they did a great job. George, he's a bad guy. So he tells Pearl this. Pearl says, "Buzzy has to meet him, okay? I could take you to the restaurant on Connecticut Avenue in Washington. It was in the summer. We're sitting outside, Pearl, me, and him, and two of his buddies. And my back's to the street, and the waiter comes in and goes out and everything. And at the end, and he's just done nothing but talking. And he turns around and he says, "What is it?" And the guys have the check. So we get in a big fight about who's going to, I don't want to be indebted to this guy for anything. And I know you might, blah, blah, blah. All right, so he gives a credit card. The waiter goes back, and he's back on me again, going, blah, blah. And the guy comes out again, and I'm looking again. "Now what do you want?" "Sir, the credit card didn't go through." Swear to you. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you all.